שישמח פוזח אלוהי אלוהי בכל שיבוא 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 אני בא באמונה שיבוא בפיית המשיח אני מאמין.
Good evening. Welcome to Moshiach Mystery class. This evening, we will be discussing, Bezras Hashem, about the concept of how we could talk about, in general, that the process of Geula is already beginning. So, in previous Shiurim, on our previous last week, our previous Shiur, we talked about how the Rebbe points to three major components in how the Avodah and Golus, how our service of Hashem and Golus has been completed to the extent that now we can't say that there's any particular thing which is holding back the Geula. The Geula is literally able to come any second. We don't understand why the Geula hasn't come yet. So, in addition to that, the Rebbe also talks about certain things that are happening or happened in the world, which are, so to say, the part of the unfolding of the Geula. So before we even get into that, before we even talk about what exactly those things are, so let's first try to understand, how could we even talk in such a manner? How could we even say that the Geula is unfolding before us? Because seemingly we're still in Golus, we're still in exile, and the Geula hasn't yet come. So how is it possible even to talk about and say that the Geula is somehow starting in some way or another? What does that mean exactly? And furthermore, an even greater question is, we know the Rebbe's approach. There was many people who saw, for example, the fact that the state of Israel was created. They saw that as the Aschalta to the Geula, as the beginning of the redemption. And the Rebbe said that that's definitely not the case, and he proved it based on halacha, that we cannot say that this is already the beginning of Geula. So we have to understand. So then later, especially in Tafshin Nun, Tafshin Aleph, 1990, 91, the Rebbe began saying that there are certain events that are happening in the world. These things are some type of beginning of Geula, or some type of taste of Geula. So how is that different than what the Rebbe had been saying for 40 years beforehand, that the Geula hasn't yet begun, and the beginning and the creation of the state of Israel is not the beginning of Geula? So what's the difference? How is it that we could point to other things and say that they are a foretaste or some type of beginning in some way or another of Geula? When it comes to the state of Israel and those who wanted to say that the Geula can come, they quoted I think a Mezeritch, a Gemora, a Yerushalmi maybe, that says the Geula is going to come kima, slowly but surely. The Rebbe said that's not the case, because in Halacha the Rambam says it's not that way. So what's the difference between these two approaches? So let's just talk about, at first, in general, there's a concept that the Rebbe talks about, that Torah is everlasting. So when we talk about how Torah is everlasting, so what does that mean? What does that mean that Torah is everlasting? So the Rebbe explains, Torah that's everlasting means not only that the mitzvahs of the Torah apply in all times, but every single thing, every single story that the Torah talks about, although in the literal sense it only happened at one time in history. Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov only lived one time in history, and the Jewish people only left Egypt one time in history, and the sea was only split one time in history. Nevertheless, these are things that the spiritual meaning behind them is something which is eternal. And therefore, each and every person can see in their own lives and can experience Yetzias Mitzrayim, can experience the Exodus from Egypt, and can experience Kriyas Yamsuf, the splitting of the Red Sea, because Torah is everlasting, meaning it's everlasting in the spiritual sense. So maybe we could go a step further and say that when we say that Torah is everlasting, and therefore events that happen in the past, they're not just events that happen in the past, but they have meaning also for all times, the same thing also applies to events in the future. So when the Torah talks about the Geula and things that are going to happen in the future, so although these are certain events that are going to happen in the literal sense, in the physical sense, sometime in the future, nevertheless, since Torah is everlasting, they apply in a spiritual sense now as well. So anything that we learn about, anything that our sages tell us that's going to happen when the Geula comes, it's not only something that's going to happen in the future, but it's also something that's applicable now. So just to cite an example, there's a story in the Gemora in Gemora Zvachim, Daf Yitesam and Aleph, 19a, that there was a Jewish sage who stood in front of the king of Persia, and when the king saw that his belt was not in the right place, so the king stood up and he fixed this sage's belt, and the king said that it says concerning the Jewish people that they are Mamleches Kohanim Begoy Kadosh, that they are a kingdom of priests in a holy nation, and therefore he found it befitting that he fixed this sage's belt, his belt. Now, when the sage returned to the base Mezeritch, so his friends told him that this king fulfilled the verse which says V'hayu melachim oimnayach. There's a verse that says that kings will be your how would you translate oimnayach? They'll be like your helpers or something like that. So now let's think about this for a second. So this is a pasuk which is talking about the Geula. It's talking about when Moshiach comes. So even the kings of the nations will be our servants. So now everyone agrees, right, that at that point in history that the Gemora is talking about, with this whole story with the sage and the king of Persia, was long before the Geula, and it was in the height of Golus, the height of exile. Nevertheless, when this king stood up and he fixed the sage's belt, so what did his friends tell him? That this is a fulfillment of the verse V'hayu melachim oimnayach. So obviously it doesn't mean in the literal sense. It's obviously a pasuk that's talking about the Mashiach, talking about the era of redemption, the era of Mashiach. Nevertheless, we can experience also nowadays some type of taste of things that will only happen in the future. That's right. Yeah, so just like we can experience Yetzias Mitzrayim, like Chassidus says, by going out of our limitations that are holding us back from serving Hashem, so too we can experience also some of the things that will only happen when Mashiach comes now as well. And there's other examples. For example, the Gemora in Shabbos, Lamed Amud Beis 30b talks about that there was a Rabbi Gamliel said that when Mashiach comes, Asida Isha Shetele B'chol Yom. He says a woman is going to give birth every single day. And it says that there was a student over there who laughed and said, "How is that possible?" Yeah, it's not possible, right? And he said furthermore that he says that Eretz Yisroel, he says the fruits are going to bear, the trees are going to bear fruit every single day. And he laughed at that as well. So Rabbi Gamliel said, "Come, I'll show you a similar thing that happens nowadays in this world." And he showed him a rooster who hatches eggs every single day. So now obviously a rooster hatching eggs is obviously different than what Mashiach, what the Gemara is talking about, what he was talking about that's going to happen in the era of Mashiach, that a woman's going to give birth to a child every day. But the point is that anything that happens, that's going to happen when Mashiach comes, there is some, since Torah is everlasting, there is some existence. It does exist in some way now as well. Yeah. So that's one point. That's one point, that since Torah is everlasting, so anything that's going to happen when Mashiach comes can exist, at least in a spiritual sense, and even in a physical sense, nowadays as well. Furthermore, we know that the Rambam describes Mashiach, the process of Mashiach, as like sort of say a natural process, right? That it's something that it's eventually going to happen. That it's happening in sort of say in b'derech hateva. So therefore we can understand that since part of the nature of the world is that there's a process, right? Things follow a certain process. So it only makes sense that the process of Geula, it's also a process. Okay. So that's just a general introduction to this concept, right? That first of all, since Torah is everlasting, so everything that's going to happen when Mashiach comes exists now as well, at least in a spiritual sense. And number two, that since Mashiach is a process that's going to happen, so therefore it only makes sense that we can view this process as happening. Okay. Now, at the same time, as we mentioned before, the Rebbe saw that people who say that, for example, the fact that now there's the creation of a state in Israel, that they saw that as the beginning of the Geula. The Rebbe said that no, that's not the beginning of the Geula. So, how is what the Rebbe talked about different than this? That was our question. So, I think we could point out a couple differences. So first let's go over the general differences and we'll explain each one. So one major difference is that one of the reasons the Rebbe said that the Geula, that the creation of the state of Israel is not the beginning of Geula, is because there's no such thing as the Geula without a Goel, without a Redeemer. There has to be a person, there has to be Moshiach who's going to bring the Geula. That's one point. Another point is, he says that the Geula Shleima is only after we build the Beis HaMikdash. And only after we build the Beis HaMikdash, then there's Kibbutz Nitchei Yisroel, then Mashiach will gather in the Jewish people. So until that happens, we're still in Galus. Now, a third point, I think a very important point that sometimes I think we gloss over, is that when we talk about Geula isn't just in a physical sense. Geula is primarily in other words, there's the physical Geula. There's the fact that the Jewish people are going to return to the land of Israel, right? Literally, that we're going to leave the physical exile and go back to the physical state of Israel. But the main Geula is not the physical Geula. The main Geula is a spiritual Geula. Is the fact that Hashem, that the whole world will be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, and we'll have shleimus of Torah mitzvahs, and we'll have the completion of Torah mitzvahs as we discussed in many of our classes.
Also, we'll go to Yerushalayim at least 3 times a year, but it doesn't necessarily mean we need to live successful living.
Okay, yeah, you're talking about where exactly will all the Jewish people live. It does imply that we'll all live in Eretz Yisrael, but not necessarily close to the Beis HaMikdash. That's another discussion, yeah? Maybe we'll discuss that one time. Another interesting thing, another difference is that whenever the Rebbe talks about how we see that Mashiach is beginning, it's usually the Rebbe is talking about things that have already happened, right? Things that have already in the past, right? Oh, look what just happened. This is a sign that Mashiach is on his way. But whenever the Rebbe talks about the Geula coming, the Rebbe never talks about it as a gradual process. The Rebbe always talks about it that Mashiach is going that the Geula HaMitzvah Shleima, the true and ultimate redemption, is going to happen immediately. So this is different than those who say that the creation of the state of Israel, this is, so to say, the process of Geula. The Geula is happening kima, it's happening slowly but surely. The Rebbe never says that concept, the Geula is happening slowly but surely. It's whatever happened, this was a sign that Geula is coming, but now we're not there yet, and then the Geula should come immediately.
It reminds me of a famous story with
Yeah.
Alter Rebbe and Bilu. They came to him and they told him, let's go to Israel, from the Jewish state.
Right.
So he said, go to Bilu. It's Bet Yaakov L'Chuv Mincha. So the Alter Rebbe said, in the continuation, the Darkei Hashem. So they didn't agree to that.
Right. Beis Yaakov L'Chuv Mincha Ba'or Hashem. Right, exactly. Ba'or Hashem, yeah.
So they didn't agree to the Ba'or Hashem. So he said, I'm not going.
He's not participating. Right? That's the thing. It wasn't Beis Yaakov L'chuven Elcha Ba'ir Hashem.
It's the same thing. It's not Ba'or Hashem.
Right.
It's a big difference.
So very good. So let's go through each one of these things and explain each one. So the first thing is that we know that Ein Geula B'lo Goyal. There's no such thing as redemption without a redeemer. So now, where does this come from? So it's clear in the Rambam. The Rambam, when he discusses Mashiach, the Rambam starts off in Perek Yud Aleph Hilchos Malachim, HaMelech HaMashiach Asid Lamoid, right, that the King Mashiach, he is destined to rise, to bring back Malchus Beis David, and he is going to build the Beis HaMikdash, he is going to be Mekabetz in Yisroel. And then further, later in the Perek, in the same chapter, when he talks about identifying Mashiach, he says, Im Yamin Melech Mi Beis David, if we see a king from the house of David who has all the criteria that for Mashiach, he's someone who's proficient in Torah, and he's encouraging the Jewish people to walk in the ways of Torah, then he's Becheskas Mashiach, right? Then he's presumably Mashiach, and only once you have that, so then we know that we're on the path of Geula. So in other words, what's clear from the Rambam that the process of Geula starts with Mashiach, starts with the human being Mashiach. There's no such thing as the Geula starting before then. The Geula doesn't start by itself. The Geula starts with the appearance of a leader who is presumably Mashiach. We don't necessarily know 100% that he's Mashiach yet. We see that he's doing certain things which lead us to imply that he's Becheskas Mashiach. And then, eventually, when he builds the Beis HaMikdash, he's Mekabetz in Yisroel, then it happened, then he's for sure Mashiach. But there's no concept of the Geula that is happening by itself. So therefore, it's very clear, whenever the Rebbe is talking about certain things that are happening in the world before Melech HaMashiach, the Rebbe always says these things are me'ein v'dugmas HaGeula. He says they're akin, they're like the Geula, or they're a te'ima from the Geula. There are foretastes of the Geula, hachana leGeula. There are preparation for the Geula. But the Rebbe never says these things are the beginning of Geula, because the beginning of Geula can only start once we have a Melech HaMashiach. Now maybe just to take this a little bit deeper, so it's not just a technical thing, that okay, the halacha is that the Geula doesn't start till you have Mashiach. But it seems that this concept that every redemption starts with a leader, a human leader, this is something which is a yesod, a foundation in Yiddishkeit. The Rebbe is always emphasizing how every single redemption, there was always a leader. Yetzias Mitzrayim, the redemption, the exodus from Egypt, happened through Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Through the leader. Then the Jewish people, they conquered Eretz Yisroel under the leadership of Yeshua, right? And the same thing applies also for the future redemption. That the way Hashem created the world is in such a way that the Geula comes through a leader, a human leader, a Basar V'Dam. Like the pasuk says about Moshe Rabbeinu, Anochi oimed bein Hashem uveinechem, I stand between you and Hashem, lahag lachem zvar Hashem. That is the seder. That's just the process of the way Hashem wants to be revealed in this world, is through there should be a human leader. And so therefore, anything that happens, anything that just happens, so to say, it just happens not through a leader of the Jewish people, So it seems that this is not really part of the Geula. So maybe in the same on the flip side. So we know that the teachings of Chassidus, which were revealed through the Baal Shem Tov and his students, and the Rebbes that follow the Baal Shem Tov, especially the Rebbes of Chabad, the Rebbeim of Chabad, starting from the Alter Rebbe. So the Rebbe said many times that Chassidus is a foretaste of the Geula, as we discussed in many other Shiurim. So we can understand that why are we saying that Chassidus is a taste of the Geula, or how could we say that? Because we see that it's coming through Jewish leaders, it's coming through a Basar V'Dam. In other words, anything which is going to be even, this is just an idea. The Rebbe doesn't say this clearly, but just based on the idea that the Rebbe is saying, that if the Geula has to come through it, a Basar V'Dam has to come through a man of human blood, a Jewish leader, so we can understand that even the preparations for the Geula, the whole process of Geula, the spiritual process of Geula, the revelation of Chassidus is also happening through a bus of Adam. It's also happening through Jewish leaders who are the Rebbeim, starting from the Baal Shem Tov. So, okay, so that's one point. Now, just to point out another thing is that even when we talk about that bechezkas Mashiach, right? Even if we have someone who's bechezkas Mashiach, presumably Mashiach, even then the Geula technically hasn't begun yet. Right. It just means this person, he's doing things which put him under the assumption that he's probably Mashiach. But even then, the Rambam himself says it's possible that someone could be bechezkas Mashiach, but it's possible that he'll die, he'll be killed, and he won't be successful, and then you'll know that he wasn't Mashiach. So even chezkas Mashiach, meaning even if we have a human basar v'dam who's seemingly beginning the process of a Geula, but even then we don't know 100%. Till he actually builds the Beis Hamikdash and gathers in the exiles that he's actually Mashiach. So that's point number one. Point number one is that since everything has to start with Mashiach, so till we have Mashiach, so anything that's happening is not the actual Geula, it's just a preparation for the Geula. So now, so that also explains the second point, which is that the Rebbe constantly says that Geula has to come after. When does Geula begin? When the Beis Hamikdash is built. The Rambam, the sequence in the Rambam, in the halachas of the Rambam is very exact, and the fact that he says first Mashiach will build the Beis Hamikdash and then gather in the exiles, it means that the Geula hasn't begun till you build the Beis Hamikdash, and only then is there the ingathering of the exiles. Okay, so what's the idea behind that? It's just a technical thing? Just a technical thing, okay, that first you build the Beis Hamikdash and then you gather in the Jewish people? Or there's something deeper behind it? So this connects to the third point of what is Geula really about? Is it just the physical Geula, the fact that we're leaving exile? Or is there something deeper? So obviously there's something deeper. Right? So, for example, like we gave the example of Yetzias Mitzrayim, the exodus from Egypt. So, when we talk about the exodus from Egypt, so of course there was the physical exodus, that the Jewish people literally left the land of Egypt. Yeah, it was miraculous with wonders and miracles that left. But Chassidus tells us that it was more than just a physical redemption. It wasn't just it wasn't just about location or about whose rulership they were under. That they left the physical land of Egypt and the rulership of Parai. There was something deeper. That they left a land of tumah, land of impurity, and they now were becoming Avdei Hashem. Now they're becoming servants of Hashem. So they were leaving, so to say, the limitations of what we call the klipa, right? The forces that oppose Hashem. Godliness, and now they were becoming the servants of Hashem. They were en route to receive the Torah from Hashem to become His loyal subjects. So in other words, there was a spiritual process that was going on over here. So the same thing also is when we talk about the Geula. So the Geula isn't just about leaving the physical land. Okay, we're going to leave now. Not all Jews are living in the land of Israel. Okay, so we're going to pick up and we're going to move to Israel, right? Right. We're going to move to Israel, right? Or Mashiach's going to bring us all back, right? And he'll find us, yeah, right? Or we'll find a way to get there. That's not the.
I imagine how this part getting out to the sky, right?
That's not the main purpose of the Geula. The main purpose of the Geula is the spiritual Geula. What's the spiritual Geula? That now we live in exile, in a spiritual exile. We don't have all the mitzvahs. And we have a Yetzer Hara, we have our evil inclination, we have all different types of obstacles that are preventing us from fulfilling all the mitzvahs properly. And we don't have a Beis Hamikdash, there's no temple in order that we're able to fulfill all of the mitzvahs. And all the Jewish people need to live in Eretz Yisrael in order for certain mitzvahs to apply. Right, so it's a spiritual, the main Geula that we're looking for is the spiritual Geula. So therefore, whenever we talk about the Geula, whenever the Rebbe is talking about, the Geula is beginning, the Rebbe is primarily pointing to things, how we see the spiritual Geula is beginning. Not so much the physical Geula, that, Jews are moving to Israel, because that's not the main point. The main point is, look, Chassidus, right, the knowledge of Hashem is being spread throughout the world. Look, now Jews all over the world are able to fulfill, Torah and mitzvahs, right, the freedom of religion, right? Right? So, in other words, the point over here that we see is that if we're just talking about, there's something that is a technical thing, Jews are coming back to Israel, but it's not connected, and we don't see how that is helping out the spiritual Geula, so it's definitely not a Schalta de Geula, it's not the beginning of Geula, and it's not even a foretaste of Geula. Not even a foretaste, because it's not part of the process how we see the world is coming closer to the spiritual Geula. So that's the third point. The third point is the difference between, so to say, the creation of the state of Israel and all the other things that the Rebbe is pointing out is that all the things the Rebbe is pointing out are things which are leading us towards the real Geula, the spiritual Geula. As opposed to Jews living in Israel, it might be similar to the physical Geula, but it might be lacking part of the spiritual Geula. So, this leads us to the fourth point, which is the fact that all the things the Rebbe is talking about how we see the Geula is coming, are all things that happened in the past. But as far as the future Geula is talking about, we talk about it as if it's happening keheravayin, right? As in the blink of an eye. What's the idea? It is like this, seemingly, yeah? So we talk about Geula as a process, right? The Rambam says that it's like a natural process, that the world is getting closer to the Geula. So at the same time, however, we also talk about how Mashiach's coming is the greatest miracle, right? It's a miracle. We discussed in many of the previous lectures how these two things go together. On the one hand, we talk about Geula as a natural thing, because the purpose of Geula isn't to break the world, but it's to elevate the world, right? And it has to be something which the world accepts, the world changes, right? In order for the world to change, there has to be a process. On the other hand, that Mashiach is something so great and something out of this world that it's a miracle. So how do the two things fit together? The answer is that there's going to be a blend of both. It's like you could say that Mashiach is like a Nes Hamalubish B'Teva. It's like a miracle which is enclosed in nature. Right? It's enclosed in nature. It's something that's, so to say, a process. The world is changing. But at the end of the day, it's something completely miraculous, something completely new that's beyond this world. So how do we see this as far as the process of Geula is concerned? So on the one hand, the Rebbe is pointing out how, look, the world is changing. Look, all Jews throughout the world are able to fulfill Torah mitzvahs. Look, Chassidus is available to everybody, as we discussed last week, even to people who are blind. So on the one hand, we see that it's like a natural process. On the other hand, what Mashiach is going to bring to the world is so much greater than what we have now. So, let's say, for example, the fact that all Jews, even who are blind, are able to learn Chassidus, right? Now, let me ask you, is every single Jew learning Chassidus today? No, right? Unfortunately not, yet. So, what do you mean? So the world is the world developing? Is the world leading to Geula? Yes or no?
The accessibility is there.
So, what did we say? What does the Rebbe say? The accessibility is there. So at the end of the day, it's understood that the actual Geula itself, the fact that we'll literally have literally the entire world is going to be filled with the knowledge of Hashem, that's still going to be the greatest miracle, right? So despite the fact that we see how it's already happening and it's so available and we see how it can happen any second, but still the jump from the way the world is now until the world will be when Mashiach comes, it's still miraculous.
Yeah, it will be.
So in other words...
Well, it will be fixing moon also. The lines
Huh?
will be able to see, no? All the moon will be Shem will fix.
Say that again?
Or maybe this is in Kriyat.
Oh, you're asking, will Hashem fix all blemishes? Yeah, there's all other, right? All mumim, yeah, all like blemishes, all physical ailments, or yeah.
Even a coin that writes on the
Right.
hand will be writing.
Right, or anyone who's handicapped, right? There'll definitely be miracles. Yeah, that's all included. Okay, that's already a question of when exactly that's going to happen. But the point is that our view on Mashiach coming, on the process, it's like we have to sort of say have like a double, look at it in two ways. On the one hand, we have to see how look how the world changed, right? Look at all the things, look at the accessibility of Torah and Chassidus and all these things, and all the wonderful things that are happening. At the same time, we have to realize that Mashiach is a nace. It's a miraculous thing, and therefore it can happen any single second. So in other words, let's put this in other words, let's say our belief in Mashiach. So on the one hand, a Jew has to believe, right? I await Mashiach every single day, that he could come this very day, this very second. To believe that, you have to believe in a miracle. You have to believe in miracles, right? The fact that Mashiach could come this second and change the world, as the Rebbe would say, that he's going to come before Mincha, you have to believe in a miracle. That's a miracle, right? Yeah. On the other hand, we have to believe that the ultimate goal is that Mashiach is not just like a totally new world that's totally going to change this world, but it's something that's going to be enclosed in the nature of the world. So therefore, we also at the same time, we have to recognize and have to see how the process of Geula is something that's happening, right? Maybe put it in different words like this. So in general, in Chassidus, there's two types of avodah. There's emunah, which is beyond seichel, beyond our intellect, beyond our understanding, and then there's the avodah of understanding and bringing things bepnimius, right? Internalizing things through your own understanding. So our belief in Mashiach has to incorporate these two parts. On the one hand, our belief in Mashiach has to be with emunah, beyond understanding that Mashiach can come the second, or as the Rebbe would quote the Rambam, right? One action, one thought, one word of speech, one good thing could tip the scales and bring redemption to the world immediately. But at the same time, in order to really internalize the fact that the Geula is really coming, so it's not enough just to say, I believe Hashem is all-powerful and he could make miracles and things can happen in a second. In order to really internalize, we have to look out into the world and into ourselves and what's happening around us, and we have to see how the world is changing and appreciate how really the Geula really is coming. He's on his way. That's the second part. So those are these two parts that we have to incorporate. So therefore, we'll get into this a little bit more in the coming weeks about how we see how the process of Geula is happening. But basically, the main points are from tonight are, first of all, that we have to understand that till we have literally the Mashiach himself, and he reveals himself, and he brings the Geula. So till then, anything that happens is only a taste of the Geula. Second of all, when we talk about the process of Geula happening, we're primarily talking about the spiritual process that's happening, how the knowledge of Hashem and Torah mitzvahs is happening. And third of all, that despite all of this and how we see that it's happening, but at the end of the day, we believe that Mashiach is a miracle, and it can happen, therefore it can happen any second. And therefore, when we talk about Mashiach coming in the future, we speak about it as Mashiach is coming, keherafine, in the blink of an eye, because that's our belief that we await his coming every single day. And may we merit that indeed Mashiach will come this very day and at this very moment.
Moshiach